The Kz'arat Galactic Empire has always considered itself the pinnacle of evolutionary development. Thousands of years of continuous conquest, dozens of destroyed civilizations, and an indestructible armada of battlecruisers made them absolute predators among the stars. They knew only one rule: the strong devour the weak. But now, in deep space, above the gloomy surface of the human colony of New Helios, they were on the run. From whom? The Kz'arat had never run from battle. They knew no fear. And yet, the enemy that pursued them left them no choice. Invisible, restless, deadly. Even the Kz'arat armada could not stop it. Their imperial worlds fell one by one, and now the only way out was to capture the human colonies on the outskirts of the galaxy. Imperial strategic analyst Kz'arat studied the data on humanity, and his conclusions were obvious. Humans? Weak. They have recently entered space. Their ships are rusty junk. Their defense systems are outdated, completely primitive. Frankly speaking, you can't even call it a war. Or so they thought. The Kz'arat fleet emerged from hyperspace surrounding the planet. The colony had no serious fortifications. A few old orbital platforms, a few dozen ships, nothing more than trash compared to the Empire's battle galleons. Admiral Kz'arat, confident of victory, sent a standard ultimatum to the colony's main station. Humanity, bow your heads to the authority of the Kz'arat Empire. You will become our subjects. Resistance is futile. Surrender and we will allow you to live. The answer came 2 minutes later. A man in a simple military uniform appeared on the main screen. His eyes were dark and cold, and a subtle smile played on his lips. Admiral Kz'arat, greetings. I am General David Marshall, commander of the Earth Coalition Colonial Fleet. You want us to surrender? I understand. You need a home. You're running away, aren't you? You human jester! We are not fleeing, we are expanding, said Kz'arat angrily. Interesting. Do you know what makes humans different from the civilizations you destroyed? That you are weak and stupid? Laughed one of the Kz'arat officers. Marshall smiled even wider. No, it's that we prepare. Always. The transmission cut off. Alarms flashed on the screens. The scanners began to produce chaotic messages. Suddenly, dozens of invisible platforms activated in deep space, right behind the Kz'arat fleet. The Earthlings knew there was going to be an invasion. General Marshall did not waste time. Humanity had not just been watching the Kz'arat fleet. It had long ago placed unmanned stations with gravity traps in strategic locations. And now the trap is closed. Suddenly, the gravity guns opened fire. The Kz'arat ships, just a moment ago proud and confident, suddenly lost control. Powerful gravitational waves tore them out of their usual orbital routes, throwing them directly into the fire of their own battleships. Control is lost, one of the officers shouted. Is this a random gravity storm? No, it's them. And then the first attack force of Earthlings struck. Hundreds of small, maneuverable fighters suddenly emerged from the darkness of space. They did not attack head-on. No, they acted differently. Quick strikes on energy nodes, sabotage, chaos, classic guerrilla warfare tactics, but in outer space. This is not war, it's chaos, roared Kz'arat, trying to gather the fleet together. No, Admiral, whispered Kz'arat, his eyes wide with fear. This is their war. The first Kz'arat ship exploded, torn apart by internal sabotage. Then another one, and then another. Admiral Kz'arat finally realized that his fleet was not only being attacked, but dismantled piece by piece. Retreat, retreat. But it was too late. The humans had already launched the next phase. New systems were activated from space, from orbital platforms sent several years ago. Magnetic pulse charges. When they hit the Kz'arat fleet, communication was lost. Sensors went dead. Navigation systems were dead. And at that moment, through the gravitational chaos and explosions, a human armada rose from the colony. Not primitive, not weak. And they did not come to defend themselves. They came to end the war before it even began. Admiral Kz'arat looked at the monitor and saw a single message appear on his ship's screen. You wanted sanctuary. Now you will find only death. In orbit above the New Helios colony, Admiral Kz'arat pounded on the comm console, his claws leaving deep scratches on the control panel. Restore navigation! Restore systems! He roared as he watched his fleet, which had been an invincible armada just moments before, now become a chaotic jumble of wreckage and disoriented ships. There was no communication with some of his battlecruisers. The visual sensors showed only continuous chaos, explosions, Uncontrolled maneuvers, ships crashing into each other like drunken porters celebrating a successful invasion. And worst of all, people were not just attacking, they were mocking. Did you want to invade? We wanted to surprise you. This message appeared on the main screens of all Kz'arat ships. Then another. Do you want to get out of here? Press LT plus F4. What the hell is this? Roared Kz'arat, nearly throwing someone off the bridge through the command center panel. This is some kind of human joke, Admiral, mumbled Kz'arat's communications officer hesitantly. What is ALT plus F4? I don't know, but I suspect it's something offensive. Kz'arat gritted his teeth as he stared at the tactical display. If he didn't take control of the situation now, their fleet would be the first in Kz'arat history to lose to a primitive race that had been fighting for oil and throwing explosives from airplanes centuries ago. He could not let that happen. Earth Command Center, New Helios General David Marshall stood in front of a huge holographic map, arms crossed over his chest. So, what do we have? He asked, glancing over at his tactical officer, Lieutenant Ben Clark, who was twirling a cup of coffee in his hands and looking extremely smug. Well, Ben took a sip of his coffee. They're broken, scared, and don't know what's going on. And it looks like this is the first time they've ever experienced a cyber attack of this magnitude. We turned off their navigation, communications, and targeting devices, and gave them a taste of what real earthly chaos is like. And how are they reacting? Panic, chaos, one ship just crashed into another and we hacked into their loudspeakers and are playing "Never Gonna Give You Up" at top volume. General Marshall slowly turned his head to Clark. Seriously? Yeah, you have no idea how they react to Rick Astley. Marshall rubbed his face. Ben, I respect you, but we're at war. So what? Can't we have a little fun? Lieutenant Jessica Rain, the wing commander, sighed and threw her tablet on the table. All right, you guys. We've got them trapped, but what's next? They can't stay here forever. Marshall nodded. Now we're going to give them a choice. Kz'arat flagship. Thunder of the Empire. Panic alert. Take up defensive positions. Kz'arat gritted his teeth as he tried to steady the situation. The rest of the fleet was still in chaos, but the ships that were still operational began to form battle formations. All guns, fire on the human ships. Show them that we are not capable of joking. Dozens of laser batteries, proton torpedoes, and electromagnetic cannons fired simultaneously. It seemed that now people would see what a real Imperial armada was capable of. And yet not a single shot hit the target. What? The communications officer nervously swallowed his saliva. Admiral, they're using some kind of electronic jamming. Our weapons can't lock on. General Marshall appeared on the screen again, with the same calm, relaxed smile. Look, guys, I can see that you're confused. Let me explain. We have something we call electronic warfare here. You've probably never seen anything like it before because you've always fought enemies who played by your rules. So what? You want to force us to surrender? Marshall shrugged. No, you have a choice. We will give you the opportunity to get out of here, stay alive, and deliver a message to your emperor. Humanity does not play your game. Kz'arat clenched his fists. He could not let his troops lose. It was impossible. But when he looked at the tactical display, he saw his fleet, no longer a fleet. It was a wreckage. People knew what they were doing. They were not breaking the Kz'arat with power or technology. They were breaking their strategy. Kz'arat exhaled. Retreat. All ships that can, to hyperspace. Marshall nodded. A wise choice. The Kz'arat Imperial fleet retreated, leaving behind wreckage, burned ships, and its first defeat. And the people? They were already preparing for their next move, the outer orbit of New Helios. The Kz'arat Imperial fleet was retreating. The giant cruisers that had hovered predatory over the human colony a few hours ago were now turning haphazardly, trying to break through the gravity traps and electronic barriers. Things had not gone as they had planned. They expected an easy victory. They expected people to beg for mercy. They expected to take over the planet without resistance. But now they were running away. Not all of them, though. 3 Kz'arat cruisers were left behind, their hyperdrives destroyed and their navigation systems paralyzed. They hovered above the planet, slowly drifting in the cold vacuum like broken toys. And it was here that humanity once again decided to play by the rules. New Helios Command Center. So what do we have? General David Marshall slowly moved his finger across the holographic orbit map. 3 enemy cruisers, completely cut off from the main fleet, Lieutenant Jessica Rain replied. crossing her arms over her chest in concentration. Power systems are damaged, movement is minimal, weapons are partially operational. And what about the crews? We estimate there are somewhere between 800 and 1,000 on each. Marshall scratched his chin thoughtfully. They're doomed. Ben Clark, the tactical officer, set down his coffee cup. Yeah, they left theirs behind. They just abandoned them. There was silence in the command center. People didn't do that. They did not abandon their own. Not ever. Marshall looked up, and everyone in the room knew he'd made a decision. Prepare a landing party. Jessica's eyes widened. I'm sorry, what? We're going to retrieve the survivors. Clark choked on his coffee. I'm sorry, what? Marshall leaned over the table and activated the holographic projection of the ships. They didn't have time to activate the self-destruct system because the retreat was chaotic. That means we have time. We're going to extract the crews and take them prisoner. Tell me, why are we going to risk our people to save the enemy? Because they're people too. Well, not exactly human, but General, this is incredibly risky, Jessica exclaimed. Marshall nodded. That's true, but there's one small thing. They don't expect us to do it at all. TNS retaliation. 30 minutes later, Major Alex Carter sat in the transport bay checking his squad's gear. 20 Marines, fully equipped in vacuum armor suits, sat on benches, fastening their belts. Seriously? Squeaked Sergeant Jeffrey Cole. We're boarding enemy ships to rescue them? Stop grumbling, Cole, Carter huffed as he checked the charge on his energy rifle. Just tell me we have a plan. Of course we do. We're going to infiltrate the outer airlocks, take control of the control center, and lock down the enemy officers. Then we'll force their surrender, cleanly and quickly. And if they resist, Carter smiled broadly, then we'll do what we do best. Demonstrate incredible military efficiency? No, wreaking havoc. The interior corridors of the Kz'arat Ironclaw cruiser commander Kz'arat stood in the ship's half-dark bridge. The power systems were damaged, communications were down, and their Imperial fleet had retreated. His heart was beating rapidly. We were abandoned. It was hard to accept. Commander, one of the officers looked up sharply. There's intruder traffic at the airlocks. Kz'arat frowned. What? Impossible. We have not received an evacuation order. Then the alarm sounded. They're here. Video from the internal cameras appeared on the main monitor. Strange figures in black vacuum suits were moving through the corridors. They moved quickly, silently. One of them waved his hand, and suddenly something smoked in the ventilation shafts. Kz'arat didn't know what it was. But then he heard a human radio message, transmitted on all frequencies. Dear passengers of the Ironclaw cruiser, welcome aboard. We apologize for the inconvenience. We are temporarily changing the ship's management. For those who wish to surrender, the doors are open. For those who want to fight well, we didn't start this war. There was a tense silence on the bridge. People, he punched the terminal. All remaining crew, gather. We will not let these apes. And then the lights went out. Then the red alert went off, and another human voice came through the communication channels. You have 30 seconds to think. 29, 28, 27. Kz'arat swallowed. Whatever it was, this was no ordinary rescue. The interior corridors of the Ironclaw. 21-2019. The people were in no hurry. They were playing with them. Kz'arat could feel the panic growing in his subordinates. And he himself, despite all his years of service in the Empire, felt a feeling he had never experienced before. Fear. Smoke filled the corridors. Only the dim red emergency lighting could be seen through the curtain. Commander, what do we do? The security officer wheezed nervously. Kz'arat slowly wiped the sweat from his brow. Don't you see? They don't just want to destroy us. They're up to something. They're leaving us no choice. That's exactly what they want, you fool. At that moment, a dry click sounded through the broken loudspeakers. 10-9-8. Several of the junior officers instinctively retreated to the wall. Kz'arat realized that these primitive humans had outplayed them on every level. And what was worse, they did not act like ordinary Imperial enemies. They acted like hunters. Earth Command Center, New Helios. They haven't surrendered yet? Ben Clark asked in surprise as he took a sip of coffee. Jessica Rain grimaced. Well, they're stubborn. General Marshall watched the screens displaying the cruiser's status. 5 more minutes. If they don't surrender, we'll begin forced airlock opening, Ben huffed. And if they decide to die but not surrender? Marshall gave him a long look. Then we'll show them we're not like them. The bridge of the Iron Claw. The bridge door exploded. Silhouettes in black armored suits emerged from the puffs of smoke. Humans. One of them stepped forward and took off his helmet. Shortly cropped hair, cold eyes. Major Alex Carter. He dropped his weapon to the floor. Commander Kz'arat, you have lost. Kz'arat stared at him silently. What do you want from us? Carter smiled. Just to talk. You didn't think we were like you, did you? Kz'arat did not know what to say. Because he suddenly realized humans are not just an enemy. They are a completely different kind of predator. On the bridge of the Ironclaw cruiser, Kz'arat stood in motionless silence, staring at the humans who occupied the bridge of his ship. His ship. His armada had been defeated, his crew abandoned, and now even this ship was not his. Major Alex Carter stood in the center of the bridge, leaning relaxed on the console. He calmly examined the interior of the cruiser, as if he were a tourist visiting a new planet for the first time. So, Commander Kz'arat, what is your next move? Carter's voice was almost friendly, and that was what irritated Kz'arat the most. You think you can humiliate us with a victory like this? Kz'arat clenched his fists. The Empire will not forgive this. We will return, and then you will regret your choice. Carter smiled, pulling an energy knife from his pouch and twirling it in his fingers. I see no point in waiting for you to return. If you have anything to say, now is the time. Kz'arat took a sharp breath. He would not allow these primitives to play him like a child. You think you are cunning, but the Empire has an army of billions, vast fleets, planets that serve only to produce warships. You have won a small battle, but you have no idea what real war is. Carter stopped twirling his knife and leaned closer, glaring at the commander. Oh, we know what war is. The difference between you and us, Commander, is that you've only ever fought against the weak. You are used to victories that come easy to you. You have never had to fight to the last, to escape from traps, to sacrifice yourself for the sake of your comrades. You've always thought of yourselves as predators. Carter calmly opened his palm and threw the knife, which clattered to the metal floor. But what you don't realize is that we are the real predators. Major Carter here, General. General David Marshall put down his coffee cup and turned on the holographic display. Well, Carter's face appeared on the screen, and behind him was a bound Kz'arat who kept his eyes on him. Everything is under control. The ship is in our hands. The crew is captured. Casualties are minimal. Good. Marshall turned to Jessica Rain, who was crossing her arms over her chest. So what do we have? 3 enemy cruisers, prisoners of war, and a shocked commander who seems to be questioning his empire for the first time in his life. Jessica huffed. If they come back, and they will, we won't be a primitive race to them anymore. We'll be a threat. Marshall smiled. Good. On the bridge of the Ironclaw an hour later, Kz'arat watched the humans work through his systems. They were quickly mastering the technology he was proud of. These apes weren't just fighting, they were learning. Carter turned to him. So, Commander, I have a proposition for you. You will return to your empire and tell them what has happened here. You want to let me go? Yes, the Empire must learn that humanity is not just another conquered people. We will not be your slaves. We will not be your subjects. We are the beginning of your end. Kz'arat was silent. He had seen many battles. He had killed hundreds of enemies, but none of them behaved like humans. These creatures fought for something more than just survival. They fought because they believed in their cause. Carter leaned closer. Now you can give the Emperor 2 options. The first is that you recognize us as equals. You no longer invade our worlds. You no longer threaten our colonies. You leave us alone. Kz'arat squinted his eyes. And the second? Carter smiled. And the second is that you go to war. But we already know how to defeat you. There was a long silence. Finally, Kz'arat nodded slowly. I will deliver your message. Carter picked up his communicator. General, we're sending them home. Marshall's voice came back. Let them carry the message, but they will not return as they were. Kz'arat did not answer, for he knew it was true. The Empire would never be the same again. On the Kz'arat Empire's headquarters, the planet Xanor, Kz'arat stood before a holographic projection of the Kz'arat Empire's High Council. All of them, the highest strategists, commanders, and imperial advisors, stared at him intently, waiting for an explanation. Grand Marshal Kz'atol, who had survived the shame of his first defeat, stepped forward. You say the humans captured our ships, Commander Kz'arat? Yes. And released you to deliver this message? Kz'arat swallowed. Yes. Lies. Humans are barbarians. They cannot be so powerful. They should be destroyed, not listened to. But among all the voices, one remained silent. Emperor Kz'arat himself, the supreme ruler of the Kz'arat Empire, finally raised his hand. Commander Kz'arat, why do you think these apes let us go? Kz'arat met the Emperor's gaze. They want us to return. Explain. They are preparing. They are not defending themselves. They are trapping us. The Emperor thought for a moment, but then he turned his head to the conclave and said, "We cannot allow this disgrace to go unanswered. We will destroy them." The council erupted in cheers of support. The Empire decided to go to war. Earth Command Center, New Helios General Marshal stood in front of the tactical display, watching the movements of the enemy fleet. Lieutenant Jessica Rain nodded. "How many?" Ben Clark, who was on his third cup of coffee, glanced up at the screens. "A lot. Be specific, Ben. 50,000 ships." There was silence. Marshall rubbed his chin. "So they really are determined to wipe us off the face of the galaxy." Jessica turned to the commander. "Is our plan still on?" Marshall grinned. "Of course it is." Operation Last Maneuver. When the Kz'arat fleet emerged from hyperspace, it found only silence. The new Helios colony was empty, not a single human ship, no defense fleet. Grand Marshal Kz'arat watched from the flagship Empire Thunder. "Is this a trap?" Kz'arat felt a cold sweat run down his back. "We are being lured." But it was too late. Numerous hyperspace tiers suddenly opened up right in front of them. Human ships emerged from the darkness, but they did not attack directly. They stood in orbit. Kz'arat roared, "All ships, open fire!" The Kz'arat fleet fired thousands of energy volleys, but nothing hit. The human ships began to disappear. Kz'arat realized, "They're illusions." "What?" "They're using holographic projections to make us fire into nothing." Meanwhile, while the Kz'arat ships were wasting their ammunition, something worse was happening. Gravitational anomalies began to shift the fleet. Kz'arat looked at the navigational indicators with horror. They were trapped. The humans were manipulating space itself. "Dear Marshal Kz'arat, welcome to the final phase of your downfall. What have you done?" "We have changed the gravitational fields around your fleet. You are now, how shall I say, in the center of a storm." Kz'arat tried to order a retreat. "We can't get out of the system." "Our navigation charts are broken," Marshall smiled. "Your ships cannot move. Your weapons are useless. And our flotilla is preparing to strike the final blow right now." Kz'arat slowly lowered his head. He knew. The Empire had lost. Marshall leaned closer to the screen. "You have one last chance. Surrender, and we will allow you to return home." Kz'arat clenched his fists. "Never." Marshall sighed. "Very well. Then it's over." The human fleet activated the final phase of the attack. But this was no longer a battle. It was an execution. The flagship cruiser of the Empire's Thunder, Kz'arat fleet gravitational anomalies, were holding the Kz'arat fleet back. The engines hummed, trying to break free, but the space around them bent, causing the ships to move erratically, lose control, and even crash into each other. "What is happening?" roared Grand Marshal Kz'arat, clutching the control panel so hard his claws left deep furrows in the panel. His tactical officer nervously swallowed his saliva. "Our navigation systems cannot plot a course, sir. The space around us is unstable." "That's impossible. No one can control space." "No one but us." General David Marshall's voice came over the loudspeakers. Kz'arat heard that calm, almost mocking tone again. The people were not shouting, not rejoicing in victory. They spoke as if everything had already been decided. The human fleet appeared on the tactical displays. 3,000 ships against 50,000, and yet humans had the advantage. Earth's command center, New Helios. Target captured, enemy trapped. Marshall stood in front of a large tactical display. He could see the Imperial ships trying to break away, firing into the void, wasting ammunition on worthless illusions. Jessica Rain crossed her arms over her chest. "What now? Do we shoot them?" Marshall shook his head. "No. We show them something they weren't expecting." Ben Clark raised his eyebrows in surprise. "David, are you kidding? This is our chance to destroy them once and for all." Marshall didn't answer, just looked at the screen where the Kz'arat commanders were screaming helplessly, not understanding what was happening. The holographic projector in front of Kz'arat glowed, and the image of General Marshall appeared in the center of the bridge. "Congratulations, Marshall. You have just become the first casualty of gravity warfare. Kz'arat clenched his fists. What the hell is this? Marshall raised his eyebrows slightly. The anomalies you see are created by our devices. We are not shooting at you. We are not destroying your fleet. We're not even blocking your weapons. He leaned closer to the camera. You did it yourself. The bridge's screens flashed with footage of the battle. Kz'arat ships fired at phantom targets, destroying their own vessels. They crashed into each other due to distorted navigation. They had become their own worst enemy. Marshall smiled. We didn't attack you. We just put you in a situation where your fear did all the work for us. Kz'arat couldn't believe it. His armada, the strongest fleet in the Empire, defeated without firing a single shot. The Marshal continued, I give you a choice, Marshal. You can continue to fight. You can try to destroy us, if you so desire. But if you do, the human fleet began to change formation. Several ships turned around, activating devices that began to create even stronger gravity waves. You will never return home. Kz'arat gritted his teeth. This is blackmail. Marshall smiled. No, it's a lesson. There was silence. Everyone on the bridge knew they had lost. Kz'arat, who had remained silent, stepped forward. So what do you propose? Marshall nodded. Withdraw your ships. No more attacks. No more threats. The Kz'arat Empire leaves humanity alone. Kz'arat looked at him fiercely, but then his gaze fell on the screens with the wrecked ships of the Empire. He exhaled heavily. All ships withdraw. Earth Command Center, New Helios. They're retreating. Jessica Rain looked at Marshall in surprise. That's it? We're just letting them go? Marshall nodded. We didn't win because we destroyed them. We won because they'll never want to fight us again. Ben Clark shook his head. You know, David, sometimes you scare me. Marshall smiled. That's a good thing. The flagship of the Empire Thunder, the Kz'arat, looked out at the retreating human army. They could destroy them. They could have wiped out their fleet, but they didn't, and that was even more frightening. Kz'arat turned to Kz'arat. They don't fear us anymore. The Marshal was silent. They knew they could win, and they didn't even fight. There was a long silence, and Kz'arat realized the Empire no longer ruled the galaxy. The galaxy belonged to those who understood how to play the long game, and humans had just shown that they were the best at this game. Main Imperial Palace, planet Xanor. 3 months later, Emperor Kz'arat sat silently on his throne, his 4 eyes staring at the holographic projection hanging in the center of the dark hall. 2 high-ranking commanders stood before him. Kz'arat, disfigured by the shame of defeat, but still alive, and Kz'arat, a former prisoner, now an advisor to the Emperor. The projection showed a detailed recreation of the last battle. Gravitational anomalies, chaos in the fleet, the moment when the Kz'arat realized they had lost before the first shot was fired. Kz'arat slowly turned his head to Kz'arat. What do you suggest? Kz'arat took a deep breath. Adaptation. Adaptation. The Emperor looked at him carefully. Yes, we can no longer do things the way they used to be. Humans have changed warfare. We either adapt or we die. Kz'arat roared. You're suggesting we be weak? Kz'arat turned to him, his gaze cold. I am suggesting that we become stronger. There was a long silence. Kz'arat clawed at his chin. And how do you propose to do that? Kz'arat smiled. We learn from them. Earth Diplomatic Station Avalon. 6 months later, Captain Jessica Rain adjusted the collar of her uniform and looked at the screen. Ben Clark, sitting next to her, sipped his coffee. Why? She nodded at the monitor. In front of them, in the center of the diplomatic hall, stood the Kz'arat delegation. But this time they did not bring ultimatums. They had come to ask for an alliance. Kz'arat stood in the center of the delegation. He wore a uniform that resembled a human's, without combat patches, without weapons. He met Jessica's gaze and tilted his head slightly. Captain Rain, it is time for a new era. Jessica turned her gaze to Marshall, who stood a little to the side, smiling silently. Humanity hadn't just won the war. They had changed the galaxy itself, forever.